Okay, we are live.
All right, thank you. And good morning. I would like to call to order the Friday, August 29th meeting of the P&I Committee. Um, First item of business, can I get a motion and a second, please, to adopt the minutes from our July 25th P&I meeting?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. Oh, yes, our new member has not familiarized herself. You get one abstention your whole term of service. Keep that in mind for the future.
He's tough.
Yeah, I run a tight ship. Come on. This is not news to anybody. All right. And then next up, and I apologize to the Rutgers folks that I'm not able to be in the room to personally meet you today, but very excited for the agrovoltaics presentation. So Susan, I don't know if you have an intro or an opening.
Not really, only to say thank you to Dave, who's here to expect us here to do a presentation for all of you. This was Commissioner Adder's suggestion, so he sort of put the idea in our heads, and Stacy coordinated, so it was really a joint effort. And I've seen the presentation. I think you'll all really learn a lot from it, and I'm sure Dave will be happy to answer questions whenever up into your heads, and we'll put it up there.
And we are ready. Ready to step aside.
Good morning, everybody.
And
And thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about our research program that we have at Rutgers University, as well as the Board of Public Utilities, BPU's program to implement what's called the dual use pilot program. We'll talk about both of those this morning. I was supposed to have been joined by Brian Schilling, our Director of Cooperative Extension at Rutgers, and unfortunately he had another last minute commitment that came up and couldn't make it, but I'm sure he very much would have enjoyed addressing you this morning as well about things within the extension service and all the outreach activities that are involved, not just with the agrivoltaics, but with a lot of other activities across the state. There's quite a bit of agriculture that occurs in the Pinelands. I guess I don't have to tell all of you that, and we very much think that there is some application for agrivoltaics based on the early research that we're hearing about. Some of that I'll show you what's going on in Massachusetts, but certainly are open to show you what we've learned so far. It's only been 1 year of crop trials that we've had so far, but we'll talk about that. As well as what's been going on in Massachusetts as well. So I'll just go ahead and get started. And I am the project lead at the university for agrivoltaics. And I work full-time at the Rutgers Eco Complex, which is up at Columbus, New Jersey. But I also wear another hat. My family has a vegetable farming operation just north of Mount Holly in a town called Jacksonville. And we do a lot of direct marketing through a stand down on 206 called the Corn Stop and through our home through pick your own business as well. We had rented a farm that's directly connected to ours for about 6 years. And during that time, the owner had sold it to a developer. The developer approached a solar developer to come in and develop solar for that farm. But it's the traditional solar farm where they put in fixed south-facing panels and put a big fence around the property right up against the panels. So that was the end of our renting that 50-acre farm. It turned into a solar farm, and it'll be that way for another 25, 30 years perhaps. And so when that happened to us, it kind of hit home. And I said, there's got to be a way around this. I saw how much light was still hitting the grass behind the panels and how much space there was around them. And since then, other technologies for solar have come along, more efficient technologies that actually work better with agriculture in between. And so it all kind of came together, and the Rutgers Agrivoltaics program has been up and running for about 4 years now. There was a lot of early planning and then getting the financing through the state to build our system. and now we're actually into the trials. So we're real happy to be where we are with doing the trials.
You know, the wrong button here. The right arrow key, maybe the layers off. Yeah, the layers off. Okay, now try it.
There, okay, great. Agrivoltaics as a program is very multidisciplinary. You not only have the crop scientists that you need to have involved, you need to have someone who knows solar panel technology. We have them on our team. We also have a sociologist, because there is a lot of interaction with the community with any solar project, and understanding how the farmer feels about farming around these, as well as what his local neighbors feel is really important. Because it all comes down to the municipal level in a lot of parts of New Jersey to either approve or turn down these larger projects. You know, we also have other people. We've got a meteorology, environmental science is important for us. Right now we've got about 20 members. This was taken about a year ago. We didn't have quite as many members back then, but this was at our ribbon cutting back at the end of September of 2024. And these panels you see behind them are mounted vertically. They're called vertical bifacial. The panels have the ability to produce electricity on both sides. That's where the bifacial comes from. In this case, we're grazing cows, beef cows. So we've got 3 locations, and all of them are at our research farms. We've spread across the state. The top one is at the animal farm right there in New Brunswick, where we have the staff that knows how to take care of the animals and move them into the barns for the winter. And so it made sense to have a system there. At the time, we were looking for novel systems to use. This vertical bifacial system is being used widely in Europe, especially in Germany. And they still produce a lot of dairy cows there, so they're doing a lot of production using these vertical bifacials. The system in the middle is down at our largest research farm in South Jersey, on the border of Cumberland and Salem County, called Rarick. And that's where our largest panel is. It's 250 kW altogether, using a technology called single axis tracker. So there's a shaft that runs underneath of those panels all the way down the length of the row. There's a motor that slowly turns those panels during the day to follow the sun. They are much more efficient when the light is striking the panel directly, like at a perpendicular angle. They produce more electricity. So these are also that new technology I was telling you that is more productive, as well as allows for better production underneath. Another nice feature about those systems is that they run north and south. So the shadowing underneath of them actually travels across the field during the day, and lighting levels are much more uniform versus the fixed south-facing panel, where there's always a shadow directly behind it. Lighting levels are very ununiform, especially in the summer, from directly behind the panels over to where the next row is. So it's a real issue. Our third spot is up in the northern Hunterdon County area. That's the Snyder Research Farm. Rolling hills, a lot of stones in the ground perhaps to deal with. So there's a lot of hay production going on there. It used to be a lot of dairy, but not anymore. But there is a lot of hay being grown, as well as other field crops. And so that site we're using for our hay experiments to see what kind of production impacts there are from using agrivoltaics there. And so I'll go into these in a little more detail. So this is the Snyder farm. I mentioned the hay. This is this year, just after our first cutting. And you can see that the hay production is pretty good, actually pretty consistent all the way through the field. One of the issues we need to tackle is that the equipment cannot go right up against the post. You don't want to damage the post or the equipment. So we end up with a strip of unmown grass or weeds that needs to be managed. And we do it using herbicide at this point, but we think that there's probably other better alternatives, different slow growing grass or native pollinator habitat is another possibility. But in all of our experiments, it's very important that we have a treatment area as well as a control. And that's why these panels don't run all the way down the row. There's gaps where it's just open field, and we compare the yields between open field versus where the panels are located. Based on last year's results, there was no significant difference in yield. Slight advantage perhaps the single panel over open field. As you recall, last year, starting in August, it was very dry. Right on through October and November. Wasn't that it was hot, it was just, very dry. These fields aren't irrigated for the hay. So perhaps there might have been some advantage there to some of the shading, either conserving moisture or keeping the plants cooler and more productive that way. We'll know a lot more after the data is collected from this year's trials as well. We're doing our third cutting starting on Tuesday. Down at Rarick, we have two groups of crops we're doing. One is vegetable crops, a lot of tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant grown in that region. Sandy soil that lends itself to starting the season very early. And so these trials are grown just the way a typical farmer would grow most of his crops in the summer on white plastic with drip irrigation underneath. And here we have randomized rows of tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. And it goes 15 feet down the row and it switches to another crop. So in each bed are all three crops, and there's 5 beds across between one row of panels and the other. And so it's a really well replicated good experiment, also with a controlled area that we collect the data from on yield as well. This chart is a little busy, but it's kind of interesting to see what the effect is. So apparently the rows that are closest to the rows of panels see less light. And because of that far right column for eggplant, pepper, and tomato all have reduced yields on the beds closest to the panels. And then as you go across to the open area, the first column up and down is open field. The second column is for single panels per tracker, and the other one's for double panels per tracker, so it's more shade, twice as much, and you can see this downward trend. So with vegetables, we need to do some research before we can feel confident in telling our growers what they can expect. There may be some negative impact on yield, but what we're hoping is that it's not significant, that it still produces an economical crop, because there's additional revenue to be made from the lease of the land for solar. Here you see our soybean trial that's down in Rarick as well. A lot of grain crops grown in that part of the state too, whether it's field corn, hay, or soybeans. Soybeans are one of the predominant crops down there, and you can see in this photo that they're doing pretty well under those panels. This is what we call the double wide panels. So there's actually, those panels are about 6.5 feet tall, and there's 2 of them. So that whole panel or whole face there is about 12 to 13 feet wide. The rows are 34 feet apart, so there's plenty of space to get a planter through. There are some farmers that have bigger combines than would fit in there, and the nice thing about these tractors is you have the ability to make those rows as wide as you want. So if we have a 45-foot need for your combine to get down the row, you want to space those rows a little bit further apart. Your production per acre on electricity will be less, but the production per panel would actually be a little bit higher, because they do tend to shade each other later in the day. So so it's a little bit of a trade-off, but the additional cost to space them further apart for a farmer is pretty minimal. For the project developer, there's a little bit of extra wire involved to run the power back to the inverter, because it's a little bit further runs, but it really is very adaptable for these kinds of crops. And again, these are all preliminary results, but based on last year's trials, both the single wide and double wide panels did better than the controls significantly. Again, it was an odd year. We had a very dry fall, but these crops were irrigated, so it wasn't for lack of water that the control did less. It had as much water as the other groups, but perhaps it stayed a little warmer, and the panels cooled the bean crop in that dry weather, and helped it to continue to grow strong. So that's real interesting results. Our vertical bifacial farm I mentioned is where we have 5 beef cows that graze in there. It's not a field that we can keep them in full time. We have three sections or three blocks as we call it. And we let them graze in each block for a week before we move them to the next one. And then there's a field outside of this area that we put them into after they're done grazing for 3 weeks in here. In the spring, we could probably almost keep them right in those areas only. But the research we're doing here is not so much on the weight gain of the cows. It's whether the panels scare the cows away if they avoid grazing in that area, which they don't. And also, how does the pasture grass perform? So we're more interested in how the grass is growing, because that will directly then translate to how many cows or sheep you can put in an acre of panels like this. So what we're looking at here, our treatments are the clearance from the ground to the bottom of the panel is either 4 foot or 2 foot. And the row spacing between one row of panels and the next is either 20 or 40 foot. So there's some variability there, some different treatments that we're taking a look at as well as our controls. As if you've ever raised cows or you know much about them, they love to scratch their backs on things. And so we had to be real careful about that. And so that yellow circle is trying to point out where our electric fence is mounted. We just have fiberglass poles that hold a single wire about a foot off the post. And that seems to do just fine. They stay away from the panels. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know they'd be doing damage to the panels just trying to scratch their backs. But it works pretty good in keeping them out there. And things are going well this year so far also. And that's up in New Brunswick. Before I get started on this is actually something that was presented just recently in Chicago at the Solar Farm Summit. It's about a cranberry project for agrivoltaics. We'll get into that. But we also at Rarick are doing cool season crops. We're interested to see if the shading helps cool season crops in some way, and you'd think it might. So we had a spinach crop grown this spring. Again, we saw a trend where it looks like the spinach was doing a little bit better between the panels than in the open control area, but it wasn't significant. And we're really hesitant to make any predictions on what's going to happen just with 1 year of crop trials, because the weather's so much different from 1 year to the next. You can see quite varying results. And so we intend to grow all these crops in that space for at least 3 years. And we're in year 2 this year. So we'll have more information to share. Okay, so let me see if I can find this one. Yeah. And the full.
Yeah, press escape again. And what's happening is that ribbon's in the way.
Uh-huh.
Let me just get it real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
That should do it.
Okay.
Oh, and if you want that ribbon to go away, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I could.
yep.
That'd be great.
Oh, one last thing.
There you go. I press the skip. There you go. There you go. Great. Thank you. So and knowing that there's a lot of cranberries being produced in the Pinelands, I thought that you might find this project of interest. Massachusetts is one of the states that's, I would say, a couple of years ahead of us in terms of implementing agrivoltaics or dual use. And they have a state-run program through their energy agency and are looking to do agrivoltaics in any mixture of different types of crops that are common in that part of the country. And it's interesting, one thing I didn't mention with our experiments is that we recognize that agrivoltaics, the results from them will vary regionally. So what benefits or problems you have in the Northeast is not the same as what you'll see down in the Southwest or even in the Southeast. And it's because different areas have different types of climate, and especially in the Southwest where it's really dry and hot, they're finding that almost all crops are using less water. The leaf temperatures are staying cooler, so there's some inherent benefits there. And especially the conservation of water is really important to them. Whereas here in the Northeast, we tend to get ample rainfall most years. And it may actually be an issue where the leaves are staying too wet. And so we may have some fungal issues that are more of a problem in agrivoltaics. We haven't seen it yet, but last year was certainly not your typical fall, so we'll continue to look at that. Not sure with cranberries, you know, what their preference on temperature is. But you know, finding a way to design a single axis tractor system to fit in a bog is certainly a challenge, and also to install it without hurting the crop significantly is important as well. And this is one called Ring Road Project. The farmer who's farming this is also a consultant for agrivoltaics. His name is Ian Ward, and he owns a company called Soul Ag. And so he was hoping to, he's a cranberry farmer. He's hoping to possibly have some experience from this field to share with other farmers. So it's a fairly large system. It's 4.4 megawatts in size. I'm not sure if they tie into those power lines alongside, but that would be my guess, because there's plenty of capacity there to take it. But in addition to the generation of power, they also are storing power there, and they're able to store 13.5 megawatt hours of power, which is quite a bit. It's also an advantage in that some of these power grids are strained already for capacity and could not handle the additional power coming in, especially, you know, these megawatt scale projects. So by having battery storage on site, they can reduce the amount exported during the day, but then continue to do it 24 hours a day. They can let the batteries put their power back on the grid during the nighttime hours. And that works out much better for the power companies. They like that because it makes it much easier to balance the grid when that's just a steady flow of power they can count on all the time. And so it'll be real interesting to see once this is operational how that's working out. We think that has a lot of application in New Jersey as well, where the grid is strained in a lot of areas where farms are. So the company that has built this system is the one who put this presentation together. And you'll find a lot of things that they are claiming they did in its design and installation. The pivot point for these panels is 10 foot high, so it's quite high. Ours are 8 foot, the pivot point. And they wanted to have it that high to allow for clearance from the workers and the equipment in the bog to the wires that are underneath the panels that are being used to carry the power off. And so they wanted to have that additional distance as a little added safety insurance. You see in these pictures as well, there's a lot of these floating pads that they used for their equipment. They used a lot of track equipment. The post driver, I think there's a little bit better picture of that in here. Yeah, see over on the right hand side, the post driver was on tracks as well, and it has to pretty much just run right down the road and drive those posts in with a hammer. There's no drilling of holes or cement being poured at all. These are all being hammered in that bog because of the quality of the soil. I think he said they actually had to go down about 12 feet with those posts, so they had to drive those posts in pretty far. In our case, it was between 6 and 7 feet that the posts went in. So you need to have some significant equipment to do that. And just different shots of how they're able to accomplish this. The bog is already in place. They're using these panels that they've moved around, these floating panels to drive on. And that seemed for the most part to help, although they did say that in the end they did see some burning of the crop underneath of that. And you can imagine with all the posts that had to be driven, the amount of logistics that was involved moving those panels around. Just some different photos. The lessons learned, some of the things that they're worried, concerned about and trying to anticipate. The EPC firm is the one that's doing the design and installation. You need to get them involved, you need to get the farmer involved, right away. Of course, you need to get the local utility involved. There's a lot of coordination that's involved with these projects, that's over and above what a normal solar farm would have to deal with. So, there's a little bit of pushback about that. But I think the large solar developers are realizing that if they do not convert to this type of system, the chances are that they probably are not going to be allowed to install their systems in a lot of places. It's just, it's a shame when they just go in and put the south facing fixed panels, how it ties up the ground and really keeps it from being farmed anymore. And one thing I was talking to Ian about was, well, how are you gonna get in and harvest these berries? Because normally they go through with the brush to bring the berries up, but they usually corral them, they bring them all into one corner to get them out. With those posts in the way, he's gonna have an additional challenge, but he doesn't seem to think, he's not fazed by it too much. He said they'll figure out how to do it. To get berries out there, and that's the way a lot of farmers are. They're very, very ingenious in the way they solve issues, and so we think that might well be the case with these posts in the bogs. Again, these are all new systems, so gathering data is important. How are they going to spray? How are they going to test the soil? And is there any compaction that they need to be aware of? These are all things that are important for continuing to grow a good quality crop down below. The type of equipment selected is important. And it's really important to get that farmer input for the operations. And that's the overall layout. As you can see, it's quite a few pounds. For 4.4 megawatts is quite a bit of electricity. At BPU, the limit on size is 5 megawatts. So this would be something at a scale that's pretty much at the limit of what they would allow for the dual use pilot program. But this is the company, and I think you could probably contact them if you would like to get more information on this particular project. All right, so now I'm going to exit out of this one.
Do you want to get back to the last one?
Yeah,
All right, if I could just see here. Oh,
no.
all this, that one there? Yeah, it's behind the ribbon, which is in the way,
Got it.
so
Thanks for your help.
you're welcome. Is this what you wanted it? And then back to here.
Oh, right. Great. All right, so for the last part of my presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Board of Public Utility and the new program that they're implementing now. It's called the Dual Use Solar Energy Pilot Program. In total, this pilot program intends to install up to 200 megawatts of electricity production over a 3-year period. They are just now in the middle of their first implementation phase, so that the clock hasn't even started ticking yet. They accepted expressions of interest from project developers, which is like a pre-application. The team that BPU has put together, including some of our RAP members, are on that evaluation committee, and they replied back to the developers with either yes, we encourage you to proceed and with a full application, or no, this really isn't a project that fits the description of what BPU is looking for. But it's a pilot program, so it's intended to sort of collect data that would then feed into the final full program that would either be implemented after the first 3 years, or this program also has the ability to continue to do research up till 5 years. So it could go a little bit longer. And BPU is the one that's in charge of implementing it, because they're the utility regulator in the state. They also have a process that you got to go through from the time it's accepted as an act, the bill is approved, to the time it's implemented. They have a straw proposal, draft rules, final rules. We're almost up to the final rule being approved by the board. That'll happen this fall. But it's a long process. It to be a little frustrating how this whole public input and reply process takes a long time. I'm sure you all know about that. I don't have to tell you that. But we are contracted. The Rutgers Agrivoltaic program is helping BPU implement this. We'll also be involved in collecting data on the crop yields and performance of the solar panels. And stakeholders have had opportunities to provide input all the way through the process. This is just a picture of one of our farms with the ground being tilled. It's at the Snyder farm. And you can see when the panels are tilted away, you can get a fairly good sized tractor alongside of it, get it up pretty close. We are promoting and encouraging the developers to make the tilting of the panels as user friendly as possible. So the farmer, when he wants to come in, has the ability to get the panels to just for temporary purposes lean all one way, or to lean towards each other in one row and away from each other in the next row. So it makes it easier for the operators to get through and minimize, eliminate any damage, hopefully. The systems we have aren't quite that user friendly, but we are hopeful that there's a demonstrated need for that for the agrivoltaics, that'll be something that'll be very commonplace. Perhaps even as something that the farmer will be able to control from his cell phone and have him move out of the way in order to get in. The reason why we don't make those posts just really tall that you don't have to worry about it is because that metal post in the ground is a lot of money. And so the shorter you can keep those posts, the less cost it is to install. And in the end, these systems have to be competitive with other systems that are out there in terms of the cost per kilowatt produced. And so that's why we want to find creative ways to get shorter posts, but still have the same equipment being used down the road next to it. The dual use solar energy pilot program is competitive. So it's not where if you apply, you automatically get permission to do it. They intend to pick the best projects. 50 megawatts is what is being allocated for the first round. And then it'll be more after that for the next 2 years. You have to commit to keeping the ground actively farmed. That's something whereby when the farmland assessment process occurs, it qualifies for farmland assessment, and the results from the trials that we are helping them do on the farms with the control area versus the treatment will demonstrate that it's actively being farmed and not just growing grass and being mowed once a year. We don't want developers kind of gaming the system. We want to make sure it stays in agriculture. And one of the benefits of this system is that to cover the additional cost of installing the panels a little bit further apart or a little taller, they can ask for an adder, which is an additional SREC value on top of the conventional SRECs that they would get if it was just a straight solar farm. So that additional incentive has helped keep the level of interest pretty high. And in the first round of pre-proposals that we got in, was very well participated in, well above the 50 megawatts that we eventually want to have installed in the first round. There's a couple of restrictions though. If you are in an ADA, an ag development area, and you have prime soils or soils of statewide importance, it has to be done in conjunction with a research study by a university within New Jersey. Not agricultural institution, but just a New Jersey higher education institution. And that's a level of research that's a little bit more stringent than if it was not in an ADA. So there will still be research at both sites. It cannot be sited on wetlands or in highlands and pinelands on preserved areas unless there's a waiver granted by the pinelands or the highlands. And that goes on to the BPU, and they have the paperwork to say that yes, that's been okay. And it cannot be installed on preserved farmland. There's no waivers or anything. The State Ag Development Committee has taken a wait and see kind of attitude on this before they allow it on preserved farms. They want to be sure that it's working the way that it's supposed to. Mentioned the research requirements. The data will be collected for 3 years, and there will be a control area that's required, as well as the treatment areas, and the crop yield or production of the animals will be measured in each area. And to do the research, BPU is contracted with us to do that at no charge to the farmer or the developer. But they don't have to use Rutgers. They can choose another institution to do that, or a private entity on non-ADA farms. If it's on an ADA farm, it has to be a New Jersey university. But anyway, they can hire someone else, but they'll have to pay for that third party. The EOI is this pre-proposal expression of interest. We are now in the process of meeting with the teams who have applied and have been given the green light to submit full applications. We're talking to them about the location and design of the control area, layout of the field to make sure that there's enough turnaround space. So there's a lot going on in the background with these projects. So in the end, I think what we're really trying to achieve is that the farmers can derive the new revenue. That'll either be through a lease agreement. If they own the ground, they'll have a lease agreement with the solar developer, because these are big projects. It's probably not going to be something that's behind the meter. It's not going to be net metered, because it's just the minimum size is 500 kW, which is bigger than most farmers would be able to use. But it is a possibility that if the farmer doesn't own the ground but is renting it, that in order to incentivize them to use and continue to farm this ground, given a little bit more hassle factor, that the rents will either be reduced or they'll actually be paid to continue to farm that, so that the project can qualify for the dual use. So we hope that benefit comes back to the farmer. With the use of batteries, there's the chance that the farm can use that power through a net metering arrangement, and in that case, there would be direct benefit for the savings in electric cost as well. There's these added incentives that the dual use program has in it. This adder hopefully will also incentivize these systems being built in this pilot program. And we hope that crop yield either won't be significantly affected or will actually improve in some cases, like we've seen with soybeans and to some extent with hay, and all the while producing clean energy, which is also important for us and for the state and the nation as a whole. So that's where we hope it ends up, and that's been our focus with a farmer first perspective. And that's it with presentations. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions. A lot of information to throw at you at once.
Madam Chair, I've got some questions, if I may.
Yes, I was talking on mute and gonna ask if anyone had questions. So go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, first of all, for this presentation. This has been terrific. I'm someone who's a fan of the concept of agrivoltaics and believe that this is a way to double production for New Jersey's farmers. And I'm hoping that the program shows that the results are encouraging. Do I understand from your presentation then that the 3 farms that you talked about initially that are part of the Rutgers program are not included in the pilot program?
Yes, that's correct. We wanted to start the research right away. And since the program wasn't implemented, these are sized so that we can actually net meter the projects at our farms. So in addition to the research that we're able to do, the farm itself also benefits from reduced electric costs because we're net metered there.
I see. Okay. And you you didn't that I saw there wasn't much discussion about how efficient the solar productivity was one array to the other. I mean, you had the vertical bifacial panels, then you also had um, the horizontally mounted panels that move that track the sun. Do you have data on that that show which of these might be more efficient?
We do, and I actually, could send a PowerPoint over to Stacy, that shows some of those results, but that's a very good question. Because that overall efficiency is really important. What, before was it? No, okay. What they're finding is that, the vertical bifacial panels are not as efficient because they're not maintaining that perpendicular orientation to the sunlight. So over the season, they produce about 2/3 of what the single axis tracker is producing. Which is significant because the panels cost the same whether they're producing that amount or not. And so we are favoring the single axis tracker. Not only because of its improved efficiency over the vertical bifacial and also the fixed south facing, but also because there may be times when the farmer wants full sun to the crop. Right after he cuts his hay, or right after he plants the corn or soybeans, he might want full sun to keep that ground warm, get the plants up and growing strong. And so you can override that tracking. They call it anti-tracking or counter-tracking. So that for
Mhm.
a 1 or 2 week window, you may not be producing as much power as you could optimally, but the farmer's gaining benefit of a good stand on the crop.
Mhm.
And so that's important also for hail protection, because these panels are designed to handle hail. And if they could shade and protect the crop a little bit, that would be good too, being able to orient them in the right way. And then at night, the trackers park horizontal. And they do that, just to minimize any wind resistance and just to keep them in a good position for the morning. But at that horizontal position, they're also seeing that there's some frost protection. When it gets really cold, the heat bounces off the bottom of the panel and instead of radiating out into the space and goes back to the crop again. So there's some frost protection that's been identified, not so much in our farms, but with crops that are sensitive to it, like cranberries and blueberries would benefit in that case. But yeah, there is definitely that information being recorded as well.
Okay. But as you go, you've been anticipating some of my questions. You just anticipated the one about hail. I'm very glad to hear that these systems are hail resistant. I think that's critical on a farm application. And you also addressed my question about the shorter posts. In your presentation, you mentioned that shorter posts reduce cost of the installation. I'm wondering though whether there might still be an attempt to during the pilot program to test systems that are mounted on higher posts because those actually have an impact on the farm production as well. Don't they? I mean, I've looked at data from farms in Wisconsin where they used, 10-foot tall or taller posts
Right.
and wind up getting greater sunshine and different impact of shading on
Mhm.
different crops.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, the post type, the higher you go, the easier it is to get the farm equipment in. It's also more uniform lighting underneath,
mhm.
right? The shading, like we saw close to the row of posts, being an issue with the vegetables, you would see less of that.
Mhm.
But we have to optimize both systems, and so I don't know where we'll end up, depending on the crop. They're in New York. We're actually looking to put them over apple crops, apple trees.
Wow.
So they'd have to be really high as well.
Yeah.
And so these are all things that are still being looked at and are very important. And one thing I didn't mention, that one of the newer technologies where the vertical, or with the trackers rather, is that there are some now that can go full vertical. So that
Wow.
would be real easy to get in and do the farming as well when you park them in that spot for a day.
Mhm.
And just have them go back to their tracking mode after you're done.
That's great. It sounds like these systems are being designed with farming in mind.
Right, exactly, and they are.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
it's important, and I think, again, the developers are seeing that there's a lot less public resistance to that. The neighbors are much more willing to accept these farms with solar panels if they know that the farming is going to continue to go on in and around them. And then
Uh,
just
I'm curious if you could speak specifically to the pilot program and whether or not there will be a deliberate attempt to engage test programs on rather blueberry farms and cranberry bogs. I mean, I found it fascinating what you were telling us about Massachusetts. I know Wisconsin's also work with blueberries. I think it's really important for our farm operations in the Pinelands to be able to have some data to know whether or not it makes sense for them to get involved in agrivoltaics.
Yeah, that's a very good question. In our recommendations to the Board of Public Utilities, we looked at the most recent ag survey to see how many acres of each crop is being grown. And certainly cranberries and blueberries are a significant crop in the state. So
Yeah.
we recommended that the number of projects being allocated kind of reflect what our current acreage is for the different crops. We didn't want all the projects to come in being sheep farms or soybean farms or hay farms. We wanted to get that spread of crops as well as regions in the state too. That from South Jersey on up to the far north, we'd like to see that happening.
I see. Okay, I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I've just I have just two other questions. I don't want to hog the committee's time here, but this is a fascinating subject. I'm really grateful that you're here to speak to us about it. You mentioned the importance of, utility scale storage batteries on site. And it sounds as though if storage battery systems can be part of an agrivoltaics package, then the farm gets the benefit of utilizing more of the electricity and becomes, I suppose, less important to connect with grid, less important to run power lines long distances to connection points to the grid. Am I correct about that, or is that not the case?
Yeah, no, it's actually a fascinating topic that almost is a subject in itself, where the the farms can become energy independent. And with the technologies like electric tractors and electric pickup trucks and refrigeration and other things that are all driven electrically, that with the right size solar agrivoltaic system on the farm, doesn't have to be the whole farm, but with the right size and battery storage, they could be energy independent. And there's even some research being done where they can use that electricity to produce ammonia nitrogen. And then the farmer can
Their own
use that as
fertilizer.
fertilizer as well. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So it's an interesting topic.
Okay. Hopefully the BPU's pilot program will also include incentives to go into storage batteries. I don't know if they do, but hopefully they will.
Well, they have separate programs on battery storage, and you can hook them together. You can stack them up.
Okay. My last question, the results that you've seen so far on Snyder Farm, Rarick Farm, the farm in New Brunswick, would you say that your results are showing that the application of agrivoltaics in New Jersey is encouraging, that it shows real promise for farms in our state?
I would say that for certain crops, we feel much more confident that it's a good system to have being done simultaneously with the crop production. The statisticians on our team would be upset with me if I was to make a prediction early on about its use for all crops.
Okay.
But remember, you don't have to get full production off of that field. If you only get 80 or 90% of the crop, but you're getting the additional revenue of the solar lease, then those two income streams from the farm help that farm be much more stable financially, and we're hoping that long term that would help encourage the next generation of farmers to stay in business and continue farming with that stability that's provided by agrivoltaics.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Anybody else have questions?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Thanks. This is gonna really show me ignorance probably here, but I'll never ask the question anyway. Does when you rotate crops on fields frequently, okay, how does that affect what choice of what you do for the solar to begin with, or doesn't it?
No, it has a big impact. And that's really critical. One of the scoring components of the evaluation form is that how versatile is the design. So, farmers will always change what they're growing according to the markets. And so you need to have that flexibility. If those systems are going to be in the ground for 30 years, you need to anticipate that, yeah, in 15 years, you may be growing something different. Whether it's corn and beans, and then you go to pumpkins or vegetables or vice versa. Or hay, you want to be able to not worry that you're locked in on a specific crop. And this happens a lot with small animals. The design works just fine for sheep. They like the shade. They come out and graze on the grass with a south facing fixed panel. But the problem is it doesn't work well for hardly any other crops. So those kinds of systems are being discouraged.
I noticed that you didn't have any examples for corn. I was wondering if you had tried it.
We haven't tried corn in our trials yet. We stayed away from it, knowing that it's a high light crop, requires a lot of light.
Right.
It's a tall crop,
Yeah,
so that can
right,
also be a
exactly
problem.
right, that's the question.
But actually in Indiana, they've been doing trials, and their posts are taller. They're up at 10 foot. And they're doing that anti-tracking that I had mentioned, where they're letting some light into the corn crop during the season. And so that seems to be working for them as well, but they only have 1 year of research trials too, so they're still waiting.
My other question is about the battery storage. We were talking earlier, but before the meeting, about the southern area, the southern end of the state being a little bit, the grid being a little bit less robust than it is in the northern area.
Mhm.
So would this storage capacity and with batteries help so that a farm or a group of farms could actually become a community solar, because they wouldn't have to necessarily go back to the larger grid? They could produce and supply to the community. I don't know enough about electricity to know if that's a silly question or not, but
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is, it would help to enable agrivoltaics much easier in areas where the grid is not very strong. For instance, at Rarick, we built a 250 kW system. But the local utility, Atlantic City Electric, would only allow us to export 50. So we went ahead and built the 250 because we wanted to do the research on the crops. But we had calculated that if we had adequate battery storage, we could produce everything that a 250 kW system would produce, store that energy in the battery, and only export 50 kW 24 hours a day, and it would take all 250 kW to do that. So it's kind of interesting that that's an option that's out there. But right now, to implement battery storage on these larger scale systems, almost doubles the price of the project. So it is pretty cost prohibitive at this point. Not to say that it won't become more economical as time goes on. And of course, if you're basically eliminating your electric bill through the net metering, then payback for battery storage is much quicker than it would be if you were exporting it and selling it for grid price, whatever the grid price was.
I'm sorry, for you.
Yeah, so if you were exporting your power to the grid
Okay.
and not using it, the price that you're going to be paid for that electricity from the utility is whatever the wholesale price is, which is often 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. But if you use that power on site and you avoid bringing power in, you're being charged, well, on average 12 to 18 cents a kilowatt hour. Depends on your area and how the meter is set up. So you're saving a lot more for that kilowatt hour by using it yourself than if you exported it. Challenges, you just can't use very much. Farms 50 kW, 100 kW is about the maximum they would use.
Would you care to guess, this is maybe unfair, why more of the electric utilities haven't been involved with this?
I think they do support clean energy technologies. It's part of, what their consumers are asking for, so they're, and what the state's requiring, I mean, it's all a matter of that. But really the challenge, I think, with something like solar or wind, is it doesn't produce that power 24 hours a day. And so you may have a sunny morning, and you're getting all this electricity put on the grid that the person managing that has to deal with. And then in the afternoon, it's cloudy, and all of a sudden, there's no electricity coming from solar. He or she's got to find somewhere else to get that power from, or else you have a blackout, and that nobody likes that either.
So it's an inconsistent reduction that maybe.
Yeah, the more consistent, the better.
Maybe we'll be moving into something better with batteries.
Yeah, that's where batteries are a good fit.
Thank you very much.
No,
Thank you. Any other questions?
If I may,
Yep, go ahead, Jerry.
Dave, thank you for such a very informative presentation.
welcome.
And congratulations on your national award.
Thanks.
Feel free to tell everybody about that.
Yeah, right. It's always better when someone else is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we just very recently received the National Solar Farm of the Year Award. I was out at the Solar Farm Summit in Chicago back in August. I was out there fortunately to be able to receive the award along with Ed Weigerick, who's our Secretary of Agriculture. He was there as well to receive that award. But it is quite an honor. I think, we applied last year and didn't get it, but we didn't have the trials to show the results from yet. And I think people started to realize that what we're doing here at Rutgers is perhaps a model for other universities to follow. And afterwards, I was talking to the director of the solar program from DOE, and he was saying he meets with a lot of universities that want to get started in research with agrivoltaics, and they refer to the Rutgers model as something that they're looking to do. So it's nice to get that kind of compliment.
Congratulations again.
Yeah.
Couple of questions, if I may. How can we dispose of panels after their 30-year or 25-year program? Is there any research developed on that part of the equation?
Right, there's research ongoing on disposal. Something I find intriguing is that in some cases they're actually after 30 years, they still produce electricity, just not as efficient.
Right.
They probably are at about 80% of what they were when they were installed. But there has been an effort to relocate them to third world countries and use them. And Africa in particular, for agrivoltaics, seems to be a really interesting spot because they have ample sunlight, have issues with water supply, and the crops there would probably really benefit from the shade. So I think reusing them somewhere else is a good way to go. Of course, it takes a lot of logistics to get them taken down and moved. That's a possibility, but there is other research going on to try and find a way to break the panels down and extract the important components.
Also, I think farms that use cold storage would benefit from this because you would shave peak, and that would save energy costs.
Yeah, it's true.
The other issue is regarding the wetland matter. With we have pretty strict requirements and constraints on managing wetland. Is there anything that we should, as a commission, look at to try to facilitate use of agrivoltaics for our farmers? Particularly as it relates to wetlands and other environmental issues that we focus on.
Right. I'm pretty sure the Board of Public Utilities would view modified ag wetlands as ag farmland and permit the agrivoltaics to occur there. But they're certainly not going to encourage knocking down of trees and
Sure.
entering what would be wetlands to be allowed. Yeah.
But in other words, if there is something that we should be in anticipation of to take a look at our rules and regulations.
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of what we're helping BPU do is to come up with a model ordinance, zoning ordinance for towns to perhaps consider for agrivoltaics. It would sort of kind of speak to some of the specific needs of agrivoltaics that would be different than a solar farm. Like the type of fencing, for instance, the distance required at the ends for turnaround space. Those are all things that would go into a model ordinance of some kind. But yeah, I think there'll be a lot more outreach in that area being done as the first round of applications is being submitted to BPU first, and then back to the developer to build after that to local townships where they have to get the approvals. Mm-hmm.
Thanks
And
again.
Jerry, I'm sorry to interrupt, just on that point, we have reached out to the folks at the BPU and are working on getting a conversation set up with them to talk about what they've seen so far on their side, especially as it relates to inquiries and expressions of interest from the Pinelands, to get a sense of what folks are looking to do, what BPU has identified as opportunities and maybe some challenges, and how we might be able to work together to, look at what we would need to do as their process moves forward, to make sure we're all working together to let folks do what they need to do and grow this industry and these opportunities for farmers.
Thanks again, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting us. Be happy to come back another year and share some results.
Yeah. And is there anybody else, Alan? I think you might have a question.
Yeah, I just figured out how to unmute myself. Sorry. And I want to thank the presenter for a very interesting discussion here this morning. I think it has good applicability to farms in New Jersey. I'm still struggling how it fits in with the essential character of the Pinelands. But I do like the units that you showed us today much better than what I would call the standard solar farms that just fills fields with fixed solar panels and takes away the agricultural use. Does any of this, and maybe I have to ask the BPU this, does any of this make any sense without a public subsidy? Do you know the answer to that? I assume that the applications to the BPU all come with some kind of a startup subsidy or
Right. I tend to hear the perspective a lot of the solar developers who claim that the advantage of solar is that to get grid scale power up online, solar projects are much quicker than would be a conventional natural gas fired power plant or especially a nuclear power plant, so that the turnaround times are much quicker. And they claim that they can produce power equivalent in cost at the wholesale level to what is being done with conventional natural gas power plants. But, you know, a lot of this, technology is brought in from overseas, so there's issues with tariffs. There's a lot of moving parts to know whether or not this could be cost competitive without any federal subsidy. That has yet to be seen.
Is it, how much, I don't, it's been a long time, so how much of the current value of the S-regs for solar?
It
You
depends
know
on
that?
the type that you're doing, so, for instance, if you were to do a large multi-megawatt grid connect system, the last round that they did, the average price was $95 per megawatt hour. That's equal to an SREC, $95.
Okay.
On the smaller systems, which is a community solar, with the rooftop parking lot systems, the incentives are a little bit higher. And I think it goes up to $115 per SREC at this point. That's a set price that the Board of Public Utilities puts in. Whereas the Grid Connect projects are competitive. They bid to BPU what it is they need to get as far as an SREC.
And if a system was put in that just used battery and supplied electricity to the farm, does that still qualify for an SREG, or because it's not contributing to the grid, it doesn't?
It still would. Mhm. As
It
long as
still
you're
would?
connected, as long as you're connected to the grid. You couldn't like build the system and not connect to the grid, you wouldn't qualify. But as long as you're connected to the grid, even though you use all of it, you would still get the SREC.
Okay. Has a Farm Bureau taken a position on this process?
Yeah, you
Funding?
know, they stepped out initially and fully supported putting in our research experiments at the 3 research farms. They really supported that. They really supported looking into the pilot scale program at the BPU. So I'd say overall they've been very supportive. Yes.
I could see that. And I want to follow up on Jerry's question about the reuse at the end of the life expectancy. Do you need to consider provisions for uh, decommissioning these things at the end of their life, or demolishing them, or
It's a very good question, and it actually is one of the things that the applications will be evaluated on is their decommissioning plan. What it is that they'll do at the end of 25 or 30 years when this system is no longer economical for them.
yeah, it's sometimes hard to even find the person that started the project after 30
right.
years.
Yeah, some towns are asking for an escrow, you know, that you set aside.
Or a bond. Well, even a bond would be iffy.
Yeah.
And
Bonds.
my final, just a technical question. On the state preserve, under the state farmland preservation program, and the easement is purchased for to take the development potential away, I think both the county in which it's located and the state SADC holds the easement. So would both entities have to approve a solar project on a deed restricted farm?
Someone here is paying out the way.
Am I not clear?
Thank you. Susan Paynight, up until last year was the director of the State Farmland Preservation Program. And so to answer that question, currently solar is allowed on preserved farms through the SADC to power the farm, right? So farmers can put that up. Currently, these facilities are not permitted on preserved farms. And I think the legislature would then consider the results of the research so that we understand, is this real, is this ag production first? And if it is, then the legislature would have to act to identify upon what conditions would this be permitted and who would be involved in that process.
Thanks, Sid.
All right, Alan, was that, you good?
I guess.
Stacy has
Yeah.
a question, Laura.
My question, Dave, is since you mentioned that most of it is not gonna be behind the meter, are most of the current applications or expressions of interest that have been submitted, are they falling under the CSI system, the Competitive Solar Incentive Program?
Yes,
And if I recall, doesn't that require some authorization from the electric provider?
yeah,
So,
as well as PJM, you know, the entity that controls the regional grid.
So-
The approval.
how, I mean, given the lack of capacity, how is that going to work with this pilot program?
You mean on the capacity to take the power off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the developers right now are cherry picking. They're going through maps to find out where the grid is strong enough to take that amount of power, and then they're talking to those.
One other question, in terms of CSI, I mean, I'm gathering that's gonna require modifications to the existing infrastructure for electric energy in order to add additional capacity.
Yeah, and I think that there was talk of some incentives for utilities to upgrade their grid in certain areas. Didn't specifically mention agrivoltaics, but we thought that that would be a good reason to do it. You know, that you might want to upgrade a substation. That's where the problem usually is at the substation.
Thank you, that's helpful for me to know.
Thanks. Anyone else with any questions or comments? All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and the info.
You're very welcome.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have an update on the Interagency Council on Climate Resiliency. I don't know who that update is coming from, and I can't see it.
Oh, that's Brad.
All right.
Okay. Yes, please do.
All right, morning, everyone. I'm gonna be providing an update on the work of the Interagency Council on Climate Resilience, which the Pinelands Commission is a member agency. Before jumping into that work of the IAC, I just wanted to take a moment and highlight a report that was just released by Rutgers this month on the state of the climate. I thought it just might be beneficial for, you know, some quick findings from that report. Let's see. Okay, so the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center, situated in Rutgers, has been releasing annual State of the Climate report for a number of years now. They produced their findings from last year. Just this month, they had a webinar. I would highly recommend you all to take a look at it. It's very informative. The webinar in particular covered a lot of ground in terms of what was contained in the report. It included a summary of historic and projected trends in New Jersey climate, in terms of trends that have been seen since 1900. New Jersey's annual temperatures have risen about 4 degrees. Sea level has increased by about 18.9 inches, and total annual rainfall has increased by 7%. So these are all things that we've been hearing about for, you know, in recent years about changing climate. In terms of projections, it is looking like temperatures are projected to increase 3.7 to 6.2 degrees relative to the 1991 to 2020 average. That's based upon a moderate greenhouse gas emissions projection. The report goes into different types of greenhouse gas projections, which would also lead to different outcomes in terms of temperature increase, sea level rise, precipitation. Those projections also show sea level rise to be increasing by 2100 to between 1.7 and 5.1 feet, depending on the rate of global warming, because the sea level rise is impacted by things, in terms of the global temperatures, not just in New Jersey. Annual rainfall is projected to increase by 3 to 13%, and extreme 24-hour rainfall by 5 to 15%. The report goes into some details about how this translates to the risks of extreme events. In particular, they kind of looked into the sort of climatic and meteorological factors that led to the devastating Hurricane Helene that dropped somewhere on the order of 30 inches of rain in western North Carolina over 4 days, and kind of connected it to increasing risk factors of those types of extreme events in New Jersey. So again, I would just point out, there's a lot more in the report about sort of all of these sort of, historical trends versus projections. Secondly, they kind of transition into, okay, what actually happened last year? And I would say, looking more closely at 2024, they highlighted how it was another sort of unusual weather year. It was the second warmest year ever, marked by a very hot summer and a dramatic shift from a relatively wet spring to a very dry fall. So on this chart here, unfortunately, I couldn't find the actual chart that showed just 2024. This one shows from August of 2024 to July of 2025. This is taken from the State Climatologist's Office website. And it just sort of highlights how, in terms of temperature, the deviations in temperature in different months. Obviously, the red bars are showing when the monthly average temperature has been exceeding the average from 91 to 2000, and so you're seeing very warm months in the summers. In terms of direction. In terms of precipitation, it's similarly along the same period here. And this is where you can sort of see, the very, very dry conditions that occurred across the state between September and April of this year. You can see it was the driest fall on record. October was actually the driest month on record, and that record goes back to 1895. So, as you all probably recall, that led to a statewide drought watch around mid-October 2024. Drought warning was issued in mid-November, and then it wasn't until we had a pretty wet May that was lifted to a drought watch in coastal and southern regions, and I think normal conditions maybe outside of those regions. So importantly, one of the things that the report really highlighted, and they talked about quite at length at the webinar, was the expectations around increasing incidences of drought moving forward. So again, this is a figure that was taken from the report, and I guess in terms of background, rainfall in New Jersey is highly variable from year to year, and within a single year, climate change is expected to make short-term droughts more frequent, even though annual rainfall is projected to increase slightly. And part of that is due to the expectations around hotter temperatures. So the first two sort of charts or maps of New Jersey are showing projections in drought change between 2041 and 2070, and comparing winter to summer. So in the winters, they're anticipating under this modeling that droughts would be less frequent, whereas in summers, droughts would be becoming more frequent. And as you sort of look at the next two panels, it's showing projections from 2071 to 2100. And this is where they're showing that, especially in the summers, there's expected risk of a greater percentage of droughts in any given year. And I think that it was roughly historically, there was around 15% of winters and 15% of summers that where drought was occurring. So if I'm reading it correctly, my understanding is that, that 15% chance of a drought could be increased to something like 25% under, sort of the worst conditions of this projections now.
But is this data, the underlying data that's available out? Not done by county, just done across the state, so you can see it regionally rather than, I worry about things like Burlington County. I mean, because obviously it's gonna be a lot different up of the the north end and the south end, so.
I would unfortunately have to defer to, I don't know the answer to that, and I'd have to defer to the details of the report, but they did go into a lot of caveats around how they were aggregating the data, how they were combining it into just the summer versus winter, because even within the summer and winter, there can be periods of drought. So they kind of get into the details of that. Unfortunately, I don't know whether it was disaggregated further.
All right, thank you.
Let's see, was there, so really, I mean, those were just some of the highlights that I thought, connected to the topic of climate resiliency. I would say again that, the work that, Rutgers, their program on their program puts together, compiles a lot of different research and information on adaptation and mitigation strategies. So I thought it would be helpful to share, and I would recommend everyone to check it out on the Rutgers website. Moving on to the work that has been going on at the Interagency Council on Climate Resilience. Just a quick background refresher, the council was established in 2019 by Executive Order 89 to develop short and long-term action plans to promote the mitigation, adaptation, resilience in New Jersey's economy, communities, natural resources. It helps to support the development and implementation of the statewide climate change resilience strategy, which we have a picture of right there. That was put out in 2021. It contains 125 broad actions across 6 priority areas. A lot of our connection in terms of the Pinelands Commission in this strategy is through priority number 2, which is to strengthen the resilience of New Jersey's ecosystems. There's 26 member agencies. Most of the strategic direction and most of the support for the ISA is provided by the DEP Office of Climate Resilience. There are monthly meetings that we attend, that I attend, and there's periodic agency head meetings. It's very interesting to sit on these meetings and see the challenges of bringing such a wide variety of agencies together who have very different missions, some very broad, some very narrow, and all try to come together to discuss, how our work relates to climate resiliency and strategies in the state's climate resilience strategy. In terms of work products this year, what the council has been working on this year, they released their 2024 annual report. In terms of things related to the commission, it's focused on our management area climate vulnerability assessment that was talked quite at length about in our climate committee. How it impacted PCF land acquisition priorities in our matrix for targeting acquisition, and as well as the implementation of our Kirkwood coherency rules at the municipal level with ordinances that were adopted. Additionally, other products that came out just this week, the New Jersey Statewide Flood Resilience Initiatives report was issued this week, which was deemed Flood Safety Week. And additionally, coming down the pike, they're anticipating releasing their Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan update later this year. So those are some of the key things that we've been talking about in meetings over the last year. In terms of extreme heat, the Resilience Action Plan that was released in 2024 covered a lot of different, aspects of the impacts of extreme heat. Again, sort of in terms of the connections to the Pinelands Commission, we're looking at the resiliency of ecosystems within the Pinelands. The connection that we sort of put forth there was that we'd be looking more closely into heat tolerant native species. We have vegetation rules in the CMP that require use of native species and vegetation. And right now we are sort of actively working, I know Paul is working on a project related to seed mixes, and I know part of that is looking at heat tolerant native species. You probably saw earlier this year, there was an Extreme Heat Awareness Week. There were a number of webinars, including one on extreme heat, how extreme heat threatens New Jersey's natural world. I think we might have spoken about it a little bit at a prior commission meeting. There was a number of experts on there, including Jennifer Cremens from Pinelands Preservation Alliance. There was a lot of interesting discussion there, especially, they did get into sort of the unique ecologies of pine barrens and what hotter and drier conditions might mean for those ecosystems. It was a very interesting webinar. Again, I think all of these are online, and some of the other ones were related to other sort of areas of impact on extreme heat. So obviously in cities, and if you're looking at it from an infrastructure perspective, there's definitely a lot of different ways of analyzing the impacts of extreme heat. This is the newest report that was just released this week. Is the statewide flood initiatives report. Essentially, the IAC was trying to compile all of the different sort of initiatives that all of the agencies are undertaking as it relates to statewide flood prevention and flood resilience. In terms of what was described about the work of the Pinelands Commission, it discusses the implementation of the CMP, including our environmental standards around stormwater management and water supply management. I just wanted to highlight that we are included in sort of the larger overarching sort of statewide initiatives that are addressing flood resilience. Lastly, I just wanted to sort of point out in the last, I guess it was starting about last year, the IAC created a subset of working groups. And it was decided that there would be 3 different working groups. One was the Extreme Heat Coordinated Communications Working Group. So that came out of the release of the Extreme Heat Wrap, where they wanted to try and focus on disseminating consistent outreach and educational materials across the agencies. So this was the group that was largely tasked with putting together the webinars this summer and coordinating information about extreme heat preparedness. Additionally, there was an IAC outreach and engagement strategy group. They were focusing on enhancing and improving sort of public understanding of the work of the AIC and trying to understand maybe what, they did some public listening sessions to sort of take sort of information from, what the public is sort of interested in the IAC to maybe be focusing on. And lastly, there was vulnerability assessment working group, which was sharing information on how state agencies are conducting vulnerability assessments and looking for opportunities to standardize how those assessments could maybe, or what opportunities there might be for standardizing certain aspects of vulnerability assessment. So member agencies were all asked to participate in at least one of these working groups. So we have been participating in the vulnerability assessment working group. Gina has been sitting in on those meetings. I know that they've had a number of very informative presentations from different agencies, and also a very informative presentation recently from the Rutgers group that has been developing the NJ Adapt website. Apparently, they've been putting together additional data sets that are helpful in sort of understanding the impacts of extreme heat. I was just, but in addition to that, in terms of the takeaways, I think some of the things that as I might be speaking out of turn, but I think some of the challenges that this vulnerability assessment group has maybe been finding is just, you know, the diversity of agencies that fall under the IAC have such different sort of missions. Some are very broad, you know, some of these agencies are quite large. So coming up with sort of standardization has been quite challenging. So, you know, it's been interesting to sort of see both the benefits of convening the groups and agencies to sort of get a bigger picture of what different corners of the state government was doing, but also sort of the challenges in trying to find commonalities to all sort of, you know, move in the same direction. So that's really sort of a whirlwind tour of what we've been doing with IAC in the last year. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Brad, and thanks for all your work. A lot of moving pieces here, so thank you and Gina for your participation in this on top of all else that you guys are doing. Anybody have any questions or comments for Brad on this?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brad, thanks very much for staying on top of that very important committee and reporting back to us the way you do. That was a very helpful summary. I'm wondering, does the committee have any sense now about their projections for increased temperatures? I mean, I saw in the report they were giving ranges, you know, this much sea level rise if we achieve 2 degrees in Celsius increase, or a higher rate of sea level rise if we achieve 2.5 degrees or 3.5. Do they speak at all about what do the latest projections tell us about where temperature rise is going, how much we're likely to see happen by the end of this century?
Yes, so I can't speak to the details, but what I can say is that the State of the Climate 2024 does have a section that sort of looks at where New Jersey's at in terms of meeting its greenhouse gas emission targets. I think that is somewhat informing. You know, I think they're also probably pulling from more national or global, you know, international reports about emissions. But I mean, they do have different projections in terms of the impacts to sea level rise. I just wanted to note that I guess Rutgers, there's a panel called STAT, I believe, that has been convened a couple of different times in recent years to review the latest science on sea level rise. The last numbers they produced were in 2019. There's anticipation that they're going to be coming out with a new report in 2025 that gives updated projections on sea level rise. And I would imagine that it would be shown across multiple sort of emission scenarios. So I think, yeah.
I don't think I expressed myself very well. What I really want to know is, do they feel that we're on target with our greenhouse gas emission reduction initiatives in the state?
I believe yes, I believe the report suggests we are on the right path, and I think it looks at sort of, I believe, the 2030 timeline and a 2050 timeline, which was based on, I guess, targets within an earlier sort of statewide strategy. I wish I could speak in more detail to that, but I'd have to defer to the report.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? All right, well, thank you again, Brad, for this. Next up on the agenda is public comment period. So Paul, if you could put up the phone number. I don't know if there's anyone in the room that has signed up or would like to speak.
Heidi said she has no comments.
All right. Then we'll give a minute or so, excuse me, in case there's anyone who would like to call in. So let's just give folks a minute there. All right, do we have any callers?
There are no callers.
All right, I'm gonna shut down public comment period. Before we move to adjourn, any commissioners have any closing comments?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank Commissioner Irick, as well as the staff, for suggesting that we have a presentation to this committee on agrivoltaics. I thought that was terrific, and I'm grateful to everybody who was responsible for putting that together. Thank you.
Yeah, echo that. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry and team. Any other comments? All right, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Abstention? All right, everyone have a great weekend.